Hey everyone, tonight we venture deep into a world lit not by screens but by the fierce orange glow of a furnace that burns hotter than a volcano's heart. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of charcoal, damp earth, and the metallic tang of creation. You're standing on the shores of Lake Victoria, but not the one you'd see on a modern safari tour. This is a place where legends are hammered into reality, and the rhythm of life is set by the percussive beat of a hammer on glowing steel. It's a world where the nearest antibiotic is 2,000 years and a continent away, and your best defense against a grumpy hippo is, well, hoping it doesn't see you. You probably wouldn't survive the week, and that's before we even get to the smelting process, which has its own unique set of hazards, like accidental super incineration. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where you're tuning in from. Drop your city and the time in the comments below so we can all feel a bit more connected on this trip back through time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey doesn't begin with a boarding pass or the hum of an engine. It begins with a thought, a dissolution of the world you know. The walls of your room fade. The gentle whir of the fan melts into the drone of a million insects, and the cool, conditioned air is replaced by a heavy, humid blanket that clings to your skin. You are standing in a sliver of time, roughly 2,500 years ago, in the verdant heart of Africa. The ground beneath your feet is a rich red earth, soft from a recent rain. Giant ferns glistening with moisture brush against your arms as you push them aside. Above you, a dense canopy of ancient trees forms a living cathedral, and shafts of golden sunlight pierce through the leaves, dappling the forest floor in shifting patterns of light and shadow. You have no map, no compass, no friendly GPS voice telling you to make a U-turn when possible. Your only guide is the distant steady sound of human activity, and the faint, smoky scent carried on the breeze. You are in the Great Lakes region of Africa, a landscape carved by the immense geological forces of the Great Rift Valley. To the east, the vast expanse of Lake Victoria shimmers like a fallen piece of the sky, its waters teeming with life and danger in equal measure. This is a world of abundance and peril. Brilliant plumed birds dart through the trees, their calls echoing in the quiet air. Monkeys chatter and leap in the high branches, their dark forms silhouetted against the bright light. But you also feel the weight of unseen eyes. A rustle in the undergrowth could be a forest antelope or a leopard. The log-like shape in the nearby stream might just be a log, or it could be a crocodile with a distinctly unlog-like appetite. This is a place that demands awareness, a constant low-level hum of vigilance that modern life has all but erased from our senses. This land is not empty. It's being shaped by one of the most significant movements in human history, the Bantu migrations. This wasn't an army marching, but a slow generational ripple of people spreading out from their ancestral homeland in West-Central Africa, moving south and east across the continent. They brought with them their languages, their agricultural practices, and a revolutionary technology, the ability to smelt iron. You are following in the footsteps of these pioneers, people who learned to read the land, to cultivate new crops, and to harness the very bones of the earth to create tools that would give them mastery over their environment. But the people you are about to meet have taken that knowledge and elevated it into something no one else on the planet has yet achieved. Historians still argue whether the knowledge of iron smelting was a uniquely African invention, or if it diffused south from contact with cultures along the Mediterranean, like the Egyptians or the Phoenicians. The traditional view often pointed to the great ironworking centers of the ancient world, like the Hittite Empire in Anatolia, as the singular source of this world-changing technology. Yet, the evidence you are walking towards challenges that simple narrative. It suggests a story of parallel innovation, of genius sparking independently in the minds of people separated by vast deserts and oceans. The idea that a group of people nestled deep in the African interior could not only discover iron, but perfect it in a way that would leave the rest of the world in the dust for centuries, feels like a secret whispered on the wind. It's a reminder that history's main stage often has curtains, and behind them, incredible dramas are unfolding unseen by the so-called great civilizations. It also makes you think about all the other things ancient peoples figured out, Consider that in ancient Egypt, a common form of sunscreen and even spermicide was a paste made from crocodile dung. It's a quirky and frankly alarming tidbit that shows a kind of resourceful, if not exactly pleasant, ingenuity. And if they could figure that out, who's to say what other more complex secrets they unlocked? This is a world of immense practical knowledge, passed down not in books but in action, in ritual, and in the quiet confidence of a master craftsman. As you draw closer to the source of the smoke, the sounds of the forest begin to blend with the sounds of a community. You hear the rhythmic thump of grain being pounded, the distant laughter of children, the low murmur of conversation. The air grows thicker with the smell of wood smoke, cooking fires, and something else, a sharper, almost electric scent of intense heat. You step out from the dense tree line into a clearing, and the sight before you makes you pause. It's a village, yes, but it's organized around a singular, strange purpose that you can't yet comprehend. And at its heart, something is breathing. You stand at the edge of the clearing, a silent observer from another time, and you begin to process the world that exists before the advent of true steel. The very concept is absent here. It's a world built of wood, stone, clay, and iron. But not the iron, you know. To understand the magnitude of what is about to unfold in this small village, you have to understand the global context. Far to the north, the Roman Empire is expanding, its legionaries marching with their iconic short swords, the gladius. These are the finest weapons of the world's greatest superpower. They are made of wrought iron. In the misty forests of northern Europe, Celtic tribesmen wield long iron swords, objects of great prestige and power. They, too, are wrought iron. What does that mean? It means the iron is heated in a furnace called a bloomery until it becomes a spongy, glowing mass riddled with impurities, or slag. The blacksmith then laboriously hammers this bloom, folding it and hammering it again and again, trying to beat the slag out. It's a brutal, sweaty, and imprecise art. The final product is a blade that is strong, certainly stronger than bronze, but it's also soft. In the heat of battle, a Roman or Celtic sword would bend sometimes drastically, forcing a warrior to try and straighten it under his foot. A rather inconvenient pause when someone is actively trying to separate your head from your shoulders. It was a tool that was good, but fundamentally flawed. Its strength was about as reliable as a modern weather forecast. This is the technological ceiling for the entire planet. From China to Britain, this is as good as it gets. To make steel, you need to do something more. You need to introduce a precise amount of carbon into the iron matrix, and you need to do it at temperatures that most ancient furnaces simply could not reach. The result of that magical combination is a metal that isn't just strong, but flexible and resilient. It holds a razor-sharp edge and can bend and return to its true form. It is, in every meaningful way, a leap forward in material science as significant as the jump from stone to metal. And in this moment, as you stand blinking in the African sun, it does not yet exist. Or so the rest of the world believes. The environment itself is a testament to both incredible bounty and formidable danger. The air is so thick with humidity, you can almost drink it. Banana groves, a staple of the local diet, grow in dense clusters, their broad green leaves providing a cool shade. Patches of cultivated land show off crops like sorghum and millet, their presence a sign of a settled agricultural people. Archaeologists debate the exact speed and pathways of the Bantu migration, but the evidence of its success is all around you. A people who have learned to make this challenging landscape their home. The soil is iron-rich, staining everything a deep terracotta red. This very earth, which they will use to build their homes and their pots, holds the secret ingredient to their future prosperity. It's a level of geological luck that other cultures could only dream of. In Northern Europe, for instance, smiths often had to rely on a bizarre source for their ore, bog iron. This was a gritty, impure iron oxide that would precipitate out of the water in peat bogs and swamps. Men would literally dredge it up from the muck. Here, the people have access to high-grade hematite, a far superior raw material, lying practically on the surface. But this generosity comes at a price. The vibrant ecosystem is also a web of threats. The tall grasses at the edge of the clearing could hide a lion. The nearby river, essential for life, is patrolled by crocodiles whose patience is measured in geological time. Herds of elephants migrate through these lands, capable of trampling a whole season's crops in a single night. And then there are the hippos in the Great Lake, which look like comical, oversized lawn ornaments, but are in fact territorial and brutally aggressive creatures responsible for more human deaths in Africa than any other large animal. They basically view your existence as a personal insult. Beyond the visible threats are the invisible ones: the mosquitoes carrying malaria, the tsetse flies carrying sleeping sickness. Every day here is a delicate negotiation with nature, a balance of respect, caution, and hard-won knowledge. There is no safety net. A broken bone, a deep cut, or a fever are not inconveniences. They are potential death sentences. Survival isn't an abstract concept, it's the first thought upon waking and the last one before sleeping. It breeds a profound sense of community, an understanding that the individual is fragile but the group is strong. Your survival depends entirely on the person next to you. It's the ultimate group project, and the failing grade is, well, fatal. This is the stage upon which our story is set. It's a world of immense potential, where the raw materials for a revolution lie waiting in the earth. It is a world of constant, imminent danger, where innovation isn't a luxury but a necessity for survival. And it is populated by people who have spent generations mastering this environment. They are not waiting for history to find them. They are about to make it in a way so profound and so far ahead of its time that the story would eventually be dismissed as a myth, a fanciful tale told by old men. You take a step forward, out of the shadows of the forest, and into the full, unfiltered sunlight of the village clearing. The conversation's quiet for a moment as heads turn. You are an anomaly, unseen, but your presence is felt as a shift in the air. Their world is about to change, and you are here to witness the fire in which it will be forged. As you step into the open, the rhythm of the village falters for a beat. The chatter dies down. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of pounding grain pauses. Faces turn towards you, a mix of curiosity and cautious appraisal in their dark eyes. You are an anomaly, a ghost from a future they cannot conceive, but in this moment you are simply a stranger. Then, as quickly as it stopped, the rhythm resumes. The women go back to their work, the men to their conversations. You are dismissed, accepted as part of the scenery, a silent watcher in their world. You are among the people who will one day be known as the Haya, a specific group within the vast tapestry of Bantu-speaking cultures. Their legacy isn't written in stone monuments or papyrus scrolls. It's buried in the rich, ferrous soil beneath your feet, waiting for millennia to be rediscovered. You take in the scene. The village is a collection of circular homes, their conical thatched roofs tapering to a neat point against the blue sky. The walls are a warm, reddish brown, made from a lattice of wooden poles, wattle, packed with a mixture of clay and dung, a technique known as daub. These are not mere huts. They are homes, meticulously constructed and surprisingly spacious inside, designed to stay cool in the relentless equatorial heat. In front of one dwelling, a woman sits patiently, scraping a large piece of inner tree bark with a serrated iron tool. She works it methodically, and you realize you're watching the creation of bark cloth, the primary textile of the region. Once treated and pounded, it becomes a soft, durable fabric, painted with intricate geometric patterns using natural dyes. It's a far cry from fast fashion. This is clothing that tells a story, each piece a testament to hours of skilled labor, probably more durable and certainly more sustainable than that t-shirt you bought online that fell apart after 3 washes. The daily life of the community flows around you like a river. A group of women stands around a large hollowed log, using heavy wooden pestles to pound millet into flour. Their movements are synchronized, a practiced choreography of labor and social interaction, their arms rising and falling in a steady, percussive beat that provides the village's heartbeat. Their laughter rings out as they talk, sharing news and gossip. Elsewhere, men sit in the shade of a massive acacia tree. Some are mending fishing nets made from tough plant fibers, their fingers moving with nimble precision. One is carefully carving a handle for an iron hoe, the shavings of wood falling at his feet. Their conversation is a low, rumbling murmur, the sound of decisions being made, of stories being told. Children, their bodies gleaming with health, chase each other through the village. Their game a boisterous mix of tag and wrestling that seems to have far fewer safety regulations than you are used to. Their playground is the entire world, and their toys are sticks, stones, and their own boundless imaginations. This is a society built on the bedrock of kinship. Everyone here is connected through a complex web of clan allegiances and family ties. Your identity is not just your own. It is the sum of your ancestors, your parents, your cousins. The elders, both men and women, command immense respect. They are the living libraries of the community, the keepers of traditions, laws, and the intricate oral histories that stretch back generations. Historians still argue whether their society was governed by a council of elders in a relatively egalitarian system, or if paramount chiefs held sway even at this early stage, accumulating wealth and power. Looking at the scene, it feels more collaborative than autocratic, but the subtle deference shown to one particular older man suggests a hierarchy is in place. It's a social structure that provides for everyone. No one starves alone, no one faces a crisis without the support of the group. Of course, the flip side is that you probably can't have a private thought without your third cousin knowing about it by lunchtime. Their sustenance is all around them. The lush banana groves are the cornerstone of their diet. This specific type of banana, the East African highland banana, is a staple crop here, and the Haya are masters of its cultivation. It's not the sweet dessert banana you know. It's a starchy variety that's cooked, steamed, and mashed to form a primary carbohydrate or fermented into a potent beer that serves as a social lubricant and a key part of rituals. This agricultural stability, a reliable food source year-round, is what allows for the specialization you are about to witness. It frees up hands and minds to focus on tasks beyond simple subsistence. It allows for artisans, for priests, and for the masters of a secret, fiery art. The Haya were part of the great wave of Bantu expansion, a movement that brought agriculture and ironworking to vast swathes of Africa. But while other groups settled and farmed, the Haya took one of those skills, the working of iron, and pushed it into a different dimension entirely. Their true wealth, their power, their legacy wasn't just in the crops they grew, but in the ground they grew it in. The very earth was their bank, and they were about to make a withdrawal that would place them centuries ahead of the rest of the world. As you look around, you see that all this life, all this activity, seems to orbit a central point in the village, a place that draws the eye. It's a strange mound-like structure that hums with a latent energy, and it's from this direction that the sharp metallic scent on the air seems to originate. Your feet carry you forward, drawn by an invisible thread of curiosity toward the structure that sits at the village's very center. As you get closer, you see it's not just a mound. It's a carefully constructed edifice, yet it seems almost organic, as if it had grown out of the red earth itself. It stands taller than the average man, a tapered chimney-like cylinder of hardened clay, its surface a mottled patchwork of reddish-brown and soot-black. It looks less like something built and more like something that has been shaped by immense, repeated heat. The air around it shimmers even though there is no visible fire, as if the clay itself has absorbed and now radiates the memory of 1,000 suns. This is the sacred furnace, the Mushonga, and it is the technological and spiritual heart of this community. It's a bizarre sight, frankly. It looks like a cross between a giant termite mound and a piece of abstract sculpture from a museum you couldn't afford to enter. Its surface is not smooth but textured, scarred with cracks and repairs from previous firings. Protruding from its base at regular intervals are a series of clay pipes, or tuyères, pointing slightly downwards into the furnace's unseen core. They look like the spouts of a dozen buried teapots. There is an aura of immense power about it, but also of danger. The ground around its base is scorched black, devoid of any grass. The villagers give it a wide berth, their paths through the clearing arcing around it. This is not a common space, it is a dedicated, almost holy precinct. No children play here. No one sits in its shade to chat. It is a place of work, of transformation, and of deep, powerful magic. To understand how revolutionary this is, you have to mentally picture its contemporaries. A Roman or Celtic smith would be working with what was essentially a glorified clay-lined pit in the ground. a bloomery furnace that was small, inefficient, and could only reach temperatures of around 1200 C to 200 F. Those furnaces could make iron, yes, but it was a messy, laborious process that produced a low-quality, slag-ridden product. This is something else entirely. This is a blast furnace. It's a design that is taller, more robust, and engineered with a sophistication that seems utterly out of place for this era. It's the Iron Age equivalent of finding a smartphone next to a stone hand axe. The secret to its construction, a fantastic and quirky tidbit of local genius, lies with a ubiquitous architect of the African savanna, the termite. The furnace is built from the clay of termite mounds. This isn't just any dirt. Termites mix soil with their saliva and other secretions to build their towering concrete hard mounds. This process creates a natural ceramic, a material that is incredibly refractory, meaning it can withstand colossal temperatures without cracking or melting. Someone at some point had the brilliant, if slightly unhinged idea to harvest these insect-built apartment complexes to build a home for a fire god. They discovered that this termite clay, when fired, became a super material, a near-perfect insulator and container for a heat so intense it could turn solid rock into liquid. It's a perfect example of biomimicry, thousands of years before the term was even invented. Archaeologists debate whether this complex design was a sudden, revolutionary invention or the result of centuries of incremental improvements to simpler furnaces. Was there a single ancient Einstein of the forge who conceived of this entire process? Or was it a slow, generational accumulation of knowledge? There is no written record, no user manual with engineering diagrams. The knowledge exists only in the minds and hands of its creators. The furnace before you is the product of that knowledge, a physical library of their metallurgical secrets. The height of the shaft, the angle of the tuyères, the specific thickness of the walls, every detail has been refined through countless trials and, undoubtedly, countless failures. You can imagine the first few attempts, furnaces cracking under the heat, the precious molten charge spilling uselessly onto the ground. The structure before you is a testament to a relentless scientific spirit of experimentation. No safety inspector would ever sign off on this thing, but its design is flawless for its purpose. It's a womb for birthing a new kind of metal, and it pulses with a latent energy that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. The Mushonga is dormant for now, a sleeping giant. But you get the distinct feeling you are about to see it wake up. Just as you begin to think the dormant furnace is merely a monument, a change sweeps through the village. It's subtle at first. The laughter of the children becomes a little more muted. The rhythmic pounding of the pestles slows, then stops. The men sitting in the shade of the acacia tree fall silent, their hands ceasing their work on nets and axe handles. A path is cleared, a silent parting of the crowd, creating an invisible corridor that leads directly to the Mushonga. There's a palpable tension in the air now, a mixture of reverence and apprehension. You follow their collective gaze and see him, the master smith. He is not a giant of a man, not a muscle-bound warrior. He is older, his body lean and wiry, a testament to a life of hard, efficient work rather than brute force. His skin is dark, like polished ebony, and stretched taut over a frame of surprising strength. He wears a simple loincloth of bark cloth, but around his shoulders is draped the skin of a leopard, its spotted pattern a clear and unambiguous symbol of his immense status and power. He walks with a slow, deliberate pace, his bare feet making no sound on the packed earth. But it is his eyes that capture you. They are deep-set and ancient, holding the flickering light of 1,000 fires. They miss nothing. He has a look that could curdle milk from a neighboring village, not out of malice, but from an intensity that seems to peel back the surface of the world and see the mechanics ticking away beneath. As he passes, the villagers avert their gaze. It is a sign of deep respect, but there's a flicker of fear in it too. This man is not like them. He is the master of a dangerous and transformative art. He commands a power that skirts the edges of the supernatural. He can take the dead, sterile rock from the earth and, through fire and will, give it a new life as a tool that can clear a forest or a weapon that can end a life. In this world, that is a kind of magic. The societal role of blacksmiths has always been a complicated one across the globe. They were essential, creators of the very tools of civilization. Yet they were often outsiders, a separate caste who guarded their secrets jealously and were viewed with suspicion. He's part revered genius, part the weird uncle you're warned not to make eye contact with at family gatherings. He is both the foundation of their society and a man who stands slightly outside of it. He doesn't acknowledge the crowd. His focus is entirely on the furnace. He approaches it not as a builder to his creation, but as a priest to his altar. His hands, gnarled and scarred from a lifetime of burns and hammer blows, reach out and gently touch the sun-warmed clay of the mushanga. He runs his palms over its rough surface, his expression unreadable. He is communing with it, checking for weaknesses, sensing its readiness. He circles the structure, his eyes scanning every inch. He kneels to inspect the tuyères, the clay pipes at the base, ensuring they are clear and properly angled. His movements are economical, precise, and imbued with a sense of ritual. Every action has been performed this way for generations. Historians still argue whether the master smiths were a hereditary caste, with the secrets passed strictly from father to son, or if talented apprentices could be chosen from outside the family line. Watching this man, his symbiosis with the furnace so complete, it feels less like a job and more like a destiny he was born into. A group of younger men follows him, keeping a respectful distance. These are his assistants, his apprentices. They carry baskets of charcoal and heavy, reddish-brown chunks of ore. They move with a kind of terrified precision, like they're trying to defuse a bomb that is also their final exam. A single gesture from the master smith sends them scurrying to fulfill a task. There is no shouting, no verbal commands. Their communication is a silent language of nods, glances, and gestures, perfected over years of working together in the roar of the bellows and the clang of the hammer. They are a well-oiled machine, and he is the central gear around which everything turns. There are strict taboos surrounding the entire process. The smiths have likely abstained from certain foods and activities for days in preparation. It is said that no woman, particularly a menstruating woman, could come near the furnace when it was being prepared, lest her presence disrupt the delicate balance of spiritual forces and cause the smelt to fail. The process is as much a spiritual crucible as it is a technological one. After his long, silent inspection is complete, the master smith stands before the opening at the base of the furnace. He looks into its dark, cool interior for a long moment. He seems satisfied. He turns his head slightly and gives a single, sharp nod to his senior apprentice. The tension in the air breaks, replaced by a flurry of controlled activity. The preparations are over. The true work is about to begin. The sleeping giant is about to be woken. And it all starts not with the fire, not with the ore, but with something you would never expect, something green and alive. The master smith's nod is the starting gun. His apprentices, who had been standing as still as statues, spring into a fluid, practiced motion. But they don't move towards the heavy baskets of iron ore, nor do they reach for the massive piles of charcoal. Instead, two of them head towards the edge of the clearing where a series of large, damp-looking bundles lie covered in wet leaves. You expect them to bring back something impressive, perhaps a special kind of rock or a rare type of wood. What they actually retrieve makes you blink in confusion. They are carrying armfuls of what looks like swamp grass. It's a messy, dripping collection of long-stemmed reeds, papyrus sedges, and broad-leafed aquatic plants, still trailing mud and smelling faintly of decay and stagnant water. It looks like the stuff you'd clear out of a clogged stream, not the key ingredient for a technological revolution. It seems profoundly anticlimactic, like a master chef preparing for his greatest dish and his first ingredient is a clump of weeds he pulled from the lawn. But the master smith watches their progress with an eagle's focus. Nothing is more important in this moment than this humble, slimy vegetation. Under his silent direction, the apprentices begin to load the furnace. This isn't a simple act of dumping materials into a hole. It's a precise, almost fanatical process of layering, a recipe passed down through generations. First, a deep bed of charcoal made from specific hardwoods is carefully placed at the bottom. Then the smith himself inspects the iron ore, heavy reddish rocks of hematite, and selects particular pieces which are placed on top of the charcoal. And then comes the secret. The apprentices take the wet swamp grass and pack it in a thick, dense layer over the ore and charcoal. The process is repeated. Charcoal, ore, swamp grass. Charcoal, ore, swamp grass. They are building a kind of metallurgical lasagna inside the furnace, each layer having a specific purpose. You realize you are watching the meticulous execution of a chemical formula that no one here can write down, but which they all understand with an intuitive genius. This is the secret. This is what separates their work from every other blacksmith on the planet. To make steel, you need to infuse iron with carbon. Wrought iron, the stuff the Romans and Celts were using, has almost no carbon, which is why it's soft and bends easily. Cast iron, which Chinese smiths had been making for centuries, has far too much carbon, making it incredibly brittle. If you hit it with a hammer, it shatters like glass. Steel exists in a magical Goldilocks zone in between, with a carbon content of roughly 0.3% to 1.7%. Getting the mix just right is the holy grail of metallurgy. The rest of the world hadn't figured it out yet. At best, European smiths would later learn to make steel through a process called carburization, taking a finished piece of soft wrought iron and baking it in a charcoal fire for days, allowing carbon to slowly soak into its surface. It was an inefficient, time-consuming process that only hardened the outer layer. The Haya weren't modifying iron. They were creating high-carbon steel from scratch, right here in the furnace. The swamp grass, botanically identified in modern times as plants like papyrus and Miscanthithium violaceum, was the key. When sealed in the furnace and heated, these plants would char and release a massive, controlled burst of carbon. This carbon, in the superheated, oxygen-starved environment of the furnace core, would be directly absorbed by the molten iron as it dripped down from the ore. It wasn't an afterthought, it was an integral part of the initial reaction. They weren't just adding a fuel source, they were adding a chemical reagent. This is a conceptual leap so vast it's almost impossible to overstate. It's like discovering how to bake a perfect cake in a single pot while everyone else is still trying to figure out how to make flour. The smell is unique. As the damp vegetation is packed into the furnace, it gives off a pungent, earthy odor, like a compost heap mixed with a forgotten gym bag. Scholars continue to debate whether the Haya intentionally selected these specific plants for their high carbon and phosphorus content through scientific observation, or if the practice evolved from ritualistic traditions where certain plants were considered spiritually potent for the smelt. Did they know the chemistry? Or did they just know that the grass from the sacred swamp, when prepared with the proper chance, yielded the strongest metal? The answer is probably a bit of both. Their science was inseparable from their spirituality. This wasn't an industrial process. It was a sacred act of creation, and this swamp grass was a critical offering to the fire spirits. A kind of artisanal, locally sourced superfood for the furnace. The loading continues until the furnace shaft is almost completely full. A tightly packed column of potential energy, a bomb of creation waiting for a spark. The recipe is complete. The secret ingredient is in place. The final clump of swamp grass is tucked away, and the apprentices seal the loading port with a heavy plug of wet clay, smoothing the edges until the furnace is a single, monolithic column. A profound quiet descends upon the clearing. The air is thick with anticipation. The smiths back away slowly, leaving the master alone before the now gorged furnace. In this moment of stillness, your eyes trace the contours of the mushonga, and you don't just see a tool anymore. You see the ghost of the immense, communal effort that brought it into being. You understand that building this furnace was a feat almost as miraculous as the steel it would soon create. This wasn't some weekend project with a confusing Swedish instruction manual. This was a sacred act of architecture, a barn raising for a god of fire. You imagine the day the work began. The master smith would have selected the site, not for convenience, but for its spiritual rightness. Then the community would have set out to gather the primary material, not from a quarry, not from a riverbed, but from the towering, rock-hard citadels of the termites. You can picture a group of men, armed with heavy iron picks and levers, approaching a massive termite mound, some of them 10 or 12 feet high. This is no simple task. These mounds are fortresses baked by the sun into a material nearly as hard as concrete, and they are defended by millions of tiny biting soldiers. Harvesting this clay is an act of respectful plunder, a negotiation with the spirits of the earth. The men would have worked for hours under the blistering sun, chipping away huge chunks of the nest and carrying them back to the village. Back in the clearing, the real work would begin. The chunks of termite clay riddled with tunnels and chambers would be smashed into smaller pieces and then pulverized. Water, carried in gourds by the women of the village, would be added, turning the dry powder into a thick, malleable mud. Then comes the part that requires everyone. You envision dozens of people, their feet and ankles covered in the red slurry, stomping and dancing on the clay. It's a scene of joyous, exhausting labor. They are treading the clay, mixing it to the perfect consistency, removing air bubbles, and combining it with a temper, perhaps chopped grass or old, crushed slag, to give it strength. This process, known as puddling, is a community dance, its rhythm a testament to their shared purpose. Then, under the master smith's exacting eye, the construction would start. There's no scaffolding, no power tools. The furnace is raised layer by layer, a slow, organic growth of coiling clay. The walls are thick, built up by hand, smoothed and shaped by palms that have known this work for a lifetime. Anthropologists debate whether the gendering of the furnace as female, a prevalent theme in many African smelting traditions, was a universal concept or specific to certain groups. But watching the process in your mind's eye, it's impossible to ignore the symbolism. They are building a womb, an earthen vessel capable of gestating stone and birthing metal. The entire process is steeped in ritual. Certain songs would be sung, certain prayers offered. The construction is as much a spiritual appeal as it is an engineering project. They aren't just building a thing, they are persuading a spirit to inhabit it. Once the main structure is complete, it must be left to dry, slowly and carefully, in the sun. Too fast and it would crack, rendering the entire structure useless and all that effort wasted. Small, smoky fires might be lit nearby to control the drying process. After days, maybe even weeks, it would be ready for its first trial. A gentle fire would be lit inside, not for smelting but for vitrification, the process of firing the clay, turning it from hardened mud into true ceramic. This initial firing hardens the inner walls, creating a glazed, non-porous surface that can withstand the incredible chemical and thermal stresses to come. Unlike the small bloomery furnaces of Europe, which were often single-use structures broken apart to retrieve the iron bloom, the Hayamushonga was a semi-permanent installation. It was a piece of capital equipment, an investment of the entire community's time and energy, designed to be repaired, relined, and used again and again. It stands now before you, a veteran of countless firings, its scarred and blackened surface a map of its long, productive life. It is the repository of their collective knowledge, their faith, and their ambition, all packed into a mud-walled tower. And now, it is hungry. The master smith steps back from the sealed furnace, his silent communion complete. He raises a hand, not in a grand gesture, but a simple, almost imperceptible signal. In response, a new group of men emerges from the periphery of the clearing. There are 8 of them. They are not the apprentices who loaded the furnace. Their role is different. They are the engine. They are the lungs. Looking at them, you see they share a similar physique, lean, but with powerfully developed shoulders and backs. They are marathon runners, not sprinters, their bodies conditioned for hours of relentless, repetitive motion. They move with a quiet confidence, each man heading to a designated station around the base of the Mushonga. At each of their stations lies a strange contraption. It consists of a large, flexible bag made of expertly stitched goatskin, the neck of which is fitted tightly around one of the clay tuyères that disappears into the furnace wall. From the top of the goatskin bag, 2 long, smooth sticks protrude, attached firmly to the leather. These are the bellows. They are beautiful, functional objects, the product of countless hours of craftsmanship. Yet they possess a raw, organic quality. They look like the disembodied lungs of some giant creature, waiting to be animated. This technology, the use of bellows to force air into a fire, was the single most important invention for high-temperature metallurgy the world over. Without a forced draft of air, a simple fire can't get hot enough to smelt iron from its ore. The 8 men take their positions, 2 on each side of the furnace, creating a square of human effort. They grasp the wooden handles. There is a moment of shared silence, a collective intake of breath. The master smith gives another slight nod, and the dance begins. The first man on the north side pulls his handles upward, lifting the goatskin bag and drawing in a great gulp of the humid air. As he does so, the man opposite him thrusts his handles downward, compressing his bag and forcing its captive air in a violent, focused jet through the tuyère and into the furnace's core. Whoosh! Then, in a perfect alternating rhythm, they reverse. The first man pushes down, the second pulls up. Whoosh! Immediately, the next pair in the sequence on the east and west sides begins their own complementary motion. Whoosh! Whoosh! The clearing is filled with a new sound, a great, rhythmic, mechanical breathing. It's a hypnotic, powerful beat that seems to synchronize with your own heartbeat. Whoosh, thump. Whoosh, thump. Whoosh, thump. The men's bodies move in a fluid, practiced choreography. It is an act of immense physical exertion, a full-body workout that would humble any modern gym enthusiast. Their muscles tense and release, sweat beginning to bead on their skin, but their faces remain masks of intense concentration. They are not just pumping air, they are breathing life into the clay giant. This is the most intense and probably least fun Pilates class ever conceived. Historians still argue whether the specific design of these bellows was a local innovation or part of a wider technological tradition spreading across the continent. The perishable nature of leather and wood means that archaeologists rarely find intact bellows, only the heat-resistant ceramic tuyères they were attached to. Reconstructions like these are based on later ethnographic accounts from the 19th and 20th centuries, and on the wear patterns found on ancient artifacts. Were there valves? Were they single chamber or double chamber? The specifics are a puzzle, but the result is undeniable. This system, with its 8 coordinated points of entry, was creating a maelstrom of air inside the furnace, a continuous, powerful blast that was already beginning to stoke the charcoal bed from a smoldering ember into a ravenous fire. For the first few minutes, nothing seems to happen. The rhythmic breathing is the only sign of the immense process that has begun. Then, you see it. A thin, lazy wisp of gray smoke begins to curl from the very top of the furnace chimney, almost 20 feet in the air. It's a signal. The fire has caught. The men at the bellows do not falter. Their pace is steady, relentless. Their job will be to maintain this exact rhythm for hours. Not 10 minutes, not 30. Hours. Through the heat of the day, under the unblinking eye of the sun, they will pump. It is a testament to human endurance and cooperation. The slow wisp of smoke thickens, turning from gray to a dirty yellowish brown as the heat begins to cook the swamp grass and other volatile materials packed inside. A low hum begins to emanate from the furnace itself, the sound of a giant beast stirring in its slumber. The gentle breath is becoming a roar. The low hum deepens, vibrating not just in your ears but in the soles of your feet and the cavity of your chest. It grows from a hum into a thrum, and then into a steady, deafening roar. It's the sound of a contained inferno, a miniature sun being born inside a clay vessel. The rhythmic breathing of the bellows is almost lost beneath the sheer violence of the sound, like a heartbeat next to a jet engine. The thin wisp of smoke billowing from the chimney is now a thick, churning column of black and orange, shot through with sparks that ascend into the blue sky like a swarm of angry fireflies. You are forced to take a step back, then another. The heat is no longer a gentle warmth. It is a physical force, a dry, aggressive wave that washes over you, sucking the moisture from the air, from your skin, from your throat. The very air in front of the furnace shimmers and distorts, making the world on the other side wobble as if seen through water. This is the miracle. This is the secret that elevates the Haya furnace from a simple bloomery to a high-efficiency blast furnace. It's not just the termite clay or the swamp grass. It's a principle of thermal engineering that would not be discovered in Europe for another millennium and a half. Preheated air. The 8 men are not just pumping room temperature air into the fire, the clay tuyères. The pipes leading from their bellows don't just poke into the furnace's edge. They extend deep inside, passing through the outer layers of incandescent charcoal before reaching the central column of ore. As the forced air travels through these ceramic tubes, it is superheated by the surrounding charcoal bed, reaching hundreds of degrees before it even hits the main reaction zone. Blowing superheated air onto a fire is exponentially more effective than blowing cool air. It's the difference between trying to start a campfire with your breath versus using a blowtorch. Archaeometallurgists still debate the precise mechanism and its efficiency, but the results are undeniable. This preheating system allowed the Haya furnace to achieve temperatures that were, for the time, scientifically impossible. European bloomeries struggled to get much hotter than 1200 C, 2200 F. This was hot enough to make iron ore soft and spongy, allowing it to be hammered into a solid block, but it wasn't hot enough to truly melt it. The Haya furnace, fueled by its preheated blast, could reach an astonishing 1800 C 3275 F. That is hotter than the melting point of iron, 1538 C. It is hotter than many volcanic lavas. Inside that roaring clay womb, the iron ore is not just softening, it is liquefying. It is turning into a molten rain, dripping down through the column of superheated charcoal and swamp grass carbon, becoming steel as it falls. The men at the bellows are now a vision of heroic endurance. Sweat streams down their bodies, carving clean paths through the grime and dust. Their muscles are taut cords of effort. This is not a job for the weak. It is a grueling, dehydrating, and frankly terrifying task. There are no safety goggles, no fire retardant suits. Their version of personal protective equipment is a healthy dose of don't stand there. Any failure in the furnace wall, any crack that allows the molten fury inside to escape, would be catastrophic. Yet they do not falter. Their rhythm is perfect, a human machine generating a constant storm of air. You can't help but feel a deep respect for their strength and discipline. They are the power plant for this entire operation. The master smith stands motionless, his face illuminated by the furnace's invisible glow. He is closer than anyone else dares to get, his expression one of absolute, unbroken concentration. He is not just watching, he is reading the furnace. He reads the color of the flame at the tuyères, the pitch and timbre of its roar, the smell of the smoke. These are the instruments on his control panel, and he is interpreting the data with the skill of a master conductor. He knows the exact moment the smelt is ready, the moment of transformation when the soul of the metal is forged. The sheer amount of fuel this process requires is staggering. A quirky but vital fact of this ancient process is its resource-to-product ratio. To produce a single kilogram of usable steel, they would have to burn through as much as 15 kilograms of charcoal. The furnace is a hungry, hungry beast. Right now, it is at the peak of its fiery hunger, and inside its belly, a new substance, a metal of the future, is being born. Hours have passed. The sun, once a white-hot coin directly overhead, has begun its slow, graceful descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of orange and purple. The world is cast in a warm, golden light, but here in the clearing, another, fiercer sun still burns. The 8 men at the bellows have become automatons, their bodies moving in a trance of pure physical endurance. Their world has shrunk to the smooth wood of the handles in their hands, the ache in their backs, and the relentless, hypnotic rhythm of the furnace's breath. The roar has not subsided for a single moment. It has been the soundtrack to the slow turning of the day, a constant, visceral reminder of the transformation happening just feet away from them. The master smith has not moved from his post. He is a statue of vigilance, his ancient eyes fixed on the base of the furnace. He is watching for a sign, a subtle change that he and only he can interpret. And then he sees it. From a small secondary tap hole near the bottom of the furnace, a single viscous tear of molten light appears. It glows a brilliant, almost white yellow. It hesitates for a moment, then another drop follows, and then another, forming a slow, lazy trickle of liquid fire that crawls down the furnace wall. This is the slag. It is the waste material, the melted rock and impurities from the ore, now lighter than the metal and floating on top. Its appearance means the great separation is complete. The moment has arrived. The smith raises his hand. It is the same quiet, economical gesture as before, but it carries an electric urgency. The 8 men at the bellows stop. In an instant, the great rhythmic breathing ceases. The silence that crashes down is more shocking than the roar it replaces. All you can hear is the furious internal crackling of the furnace itself, the ringing in your own ears and the frantic pounding of your heart. The tension is a physical thing, a tightening in your chest. The apprentices move in, their faces grim with concentration. One hands the master smith a long, heavy iron poker. He takes it, his grip sure and steady. He approaches the tap hole, the source of the fiery trickle, and with a powerful, practiced thrust, he drives the poker's point home, shattering the clay plug that held the furnace's contents in check. What happens next is terrifying and beautiful. A torrent of liquid incandescent slag bursts from the furnace. It is not red or orange, but a blinding yellow-white, a river of pure light that flows with the consistency of honey. It pours into a prepared trench in the earth, hissing, spitting, and bubbling as it consumes every stray piece of grass or twig in its path. The sound is a violent crackle and pop like a bowl of demonic breakfast cereal. The heat intensifies tenfold, forcing you to shield your face with your arm. As the river of slag flows and cools, it darkens, solidifying into a black, glassy obsidian-like substance. This is the dross, the unwanted earth, now purged and cast aside. But the real prize remains within. Once the slag run is complete, the smith gives another signal. The apprentices, armed with heavy iron tongs and levers, approach the front of the furnace. They attack the furnace wall itself, breaking away a large, pre-scored section of the clay that served as a removable door. A wave of heat, a dragon's breath billows out, and through the shimmering haze, you see it. It is a monster. A lumpen, pockmarked mass of metal, glowing with an internal malevolent cherry-red heat, sitting in the heart of the charcoal bed. This is the bloom. It is not elegant. It will not be winning any beauty contests. It is a spongy, porous, and utterly ugly piece of raw creation. It looks like a meteorite that has just torn through the atmosphere, still alive with cosmic fire. Wrestling it from the furnace is the ultimate act of hot yoga. The apprentices work together, a grunting, sweating team, jamming their levers beneath the massive bloom, fighting its immense weight and the blistering heat. With a final, coordinated heave, they drag it free. It thuds onto the scorched earth, a captive demon pulled from its fiery cage. It radiates a heat that seems to warp the very air around it, and it glows with a terrifying promise of power. This ugly, misshapen lump is the culmination of all this effort. This is the high-carbon steel. Archaeologists still debate the exact carbon content achievable in a single smelt and how much post-processing was needed to homogenize it. But the fundamental achievement is undeniable. That humble swamp grass has done its work, infusing this iron with the carbon that gives it a soul of steel. The bloom lies on the ground, a monstrous, newborn thing, its glow slowly fading from white-hot to a deep, pulsing red as the cool evening air touches its skin for the first time. The first act of creation is over. The second is about to begin. The sun has finally bled away below the horizon, and a profound velvety darkness has claimed the sky. The stars, unobscured by the haze of city lights you're used to, are a brilliant, scattered dust of diamonds. But here in the clearing, the night is held at bay by fire. The main furnace, its great work done, is now a dark, silent monolith, a black shape against the starfield. The real light, the focus of every eye in the village, comes from the bloom. It lies on the ground like a fallen star, its internal heat making it pulse with a deep, menacing red. Its glow paints the faces of the onlookers in flickering, demonic tones. They have gathered in a silent, respectful circle, their forms just silhouettes against the firelight. This is the moment of truth, the transformation of raw power into purpose. The apprentices, their monumental labor at the bellows complete, drag the monstrous bloom toward a smaller, secondary hearth, a forging pit. This is a more intimate setup, a waist-high clay structure with a single tuyère and a dedicated bellows operated now by just 1 or 2 men. It's not for smelting, it's for reheating. The master smith, who has been a figure of still watchful intensity, is now a man of action. He directs the placement of the bloom into the heart of the waiting charcoal fire. The bellows operator begins to pump, not with the frantic 8-man rhythm of before, but with a steady, controlled breath. The fire roars to life, enveloping the red-hot bloom, its flames licking up and over the porous metal, raising its temperature back up toward that brilliant yellow-white heat of workability. Once the bloom is heated to the smith's satisfaction, a judgment made by eye, based on a color that you or I would just call terrifyingly hot, the real artistry begins. 2 apprentices use massive tongs to wrestle the glowing, dripping mass from the forge and place it on a great flat-topped boulder of granite that serves as the anvil. This is not the shapely steel anvil of a medieval European fantasy. This is a piece of the earth itself, consecrated by generations of fire and force. The master smith approaches, wielding a heavy hammer. It might be a large, carefully shaped stone lashed to a wooden handle, or it might be one of the first products of this very process, a hammer of solid iron. He raises the hammer high above his head, his wiry frame coiling like a spring. For a moment, he is a silhouette against the glowing metal. Then the hammer falls. Clang. The sound is not just loud, it is a physical shockwave that rips through the quiet night air and thuds into your chest. It's a sound of pure, concussive force, and with the impact, a spectacular, violent explosion of sparks erupts from the bloom. A shower of liquid fire flies in every direction. This is not just metal sparking. This is the molten slag, the last of the impurities trapped within the spongy bloom, being violently ejected by the force of the blow. Each strike is a controlled detonation, a percussive act of purification. The smith works with a terrifying, beautiful rhythm. He is not just bludgeoning the metal, he is shaping it, consolidating it. The initial bloom is like a loaf of bread full of air pockets, except the pockets are full of molten glass. His goal in this first stage is to hammer that spongy, porous structure into a single, solid, rectangular block, a billet. He turns the bloom with a smaller pair of tongs, striking it from every angle, his blows falling in a rapid, hypnotic pattern. Clang thump, clang thump, clang thump. The sound echoes off the surrounding trees, a man-made thunder in the African night. There is a curious tradition in many blacksmithing cultures worldwide of smithing songs or chants, rhythmic vocalizations that help the smith and his striker, if he has one, to coordinate their blows without speaking. It turns the brutal labor into a kind of percussive music. Experts debate how ancient smiths were able to judge the quality of the metal as they worked. Did they understand the different properties of the high carbon and low carbon sections of the bloom just by looking at the color of the heat, the way the sparks flew, or the texture of the surface as they hammered? It's a kind of intuitive, hands-on science that leaves no written record. The master smith is reading the metal like a book written in a language of fire and force. He knows where to strike, how hard to strike, and when the metal has given up its last liquid secret. The air is thick with the sharp metallic smell of hot iron oxide. The bloom under his relentless assault begins to change. Its lumpy, irregular form is slowly beaten into a more coherent, more uniform shape. It is a brutal, fiery, and deafeningly loud process, but it is not chaos. It is control. It is the human will imposing its design on the raw stuff of the universe. He is hammering a dream into reality. The night wears on, measured not by the movement of the stars, but by the shrinking of the glowing billet and the growing fatigue in the master smith's arms. The initial, brutal hammering to consolidate the bloom is over. Now a different kind of work begins. The rhythm of the hammer changes. It becomes faster, lighter, more precise. The clang thump of purification is replaced by a higher-pitched ringing tink-tink-tink of shaping. The smith is now drawing the metal out, elongating the billet, thinning it, persuading it to take on the recognizable form of a blade. This is where the true artistry lies. He works in a state of flow, his body and the metal in a fiery conversation. He heats hammers, an endless cycle of fire and force, his mind focused on the final form held within the glowing steel. Now let's pause this scene for a moment. To truly grasp what is being created here, you need to see it not in isolation, but in context. Let's perform a thought experiment. Imagine you have two blades lying side by side on a stone slab. One is this Haya creation, once it has been quenched, tempered, and polished. The other is its direct contemporary, the absolute pinnacle of European military technology. A Roman gladius, fresh from a forge in Gaul or Italy. At first glance, they might look similar. Both are lengths of shaped metal, sharpened to an edge with a tang ready for a handle, but they are as different as a house cat and a tiger. You pick up the Roman sword. It's a fine piece of craftsmanship. The wrought iron has been expertly hammered to remove as much slag as possible. It's heavy, solid, and feels deadly. You swing it, and it cuts the air with a satisfying hiss. Now you strike its edge firmly against a thick piece of hardwood, the kind of blow that would happen when parrying a strike against a wooden shield. You hear a dull thud. When you look at the blade, there is a noticeable bend in it, a gentle but definite curve that wasn't there before. The edge has also been blunted, perhaps even rolled over on itself. Remember that callback from earlier? The Roman legionary having to pause mid-battle to straighten his sword under his foot. This is why. Wrought iron is soft. It's a reliable metal, but it lacks carbon. It's like a very, very stiff paper clip. Under stress, it permanently deforms. Now you pick up the Haya blade. The first thing you notice is the balance. It feels alive in your hand. The steel has a different look to it, a deeper, more complex luster. You perform the same test. You strike it against the same piece of hardwood with the same force. This time, the sound is not a dull thud, but a sharp, high-pitched crack. The blade bites deep into the wood, and when you pull it free, the wood is splintered and deeply gashed. You examine the blade. It is perfectly, absolutely straight. The edge is just as razor-sharp as it was before. This blade doesn't bend. It doesn't deform. It flexes for a microsecond and springs back to its true form, unleashing the stored energy of the blow into its target. This is the magic of high-carbon steel. It possesses a quality that wrought iron lacks entirely: resilience. It has a memory of its own shape. The difference is shocking. It's not an incremental improvement. It's a generational leap in technology. The Haya smith has created a blade that is harder, holds a sharper edge for longer, and is vastly more durable than the best weapons of the world's greatest empire. Metallurgists still debate the exact techniques the Haya smiths used for hardening and tempering. The controlled heating and cooling that fine-tunes the steel's crystal structure to achieve the perfect balance of hardness and toughness. But whatever their specific recipe was, it worked. The quirky tidbits of blacksmithing lore from other parts of the world often involved magical thinking, like the myth of quenching a blade in the urine of a red-headed boy or even in the body of a slave, to impart its spiritual strength to the steel. The Haya didn't need that kind of macabre theater. Their magic was real. It was chemistry. They had figured out the fundamental science while others were still looking for shortcuts in the spirit world. This blade isn't just better, it is categorically different. It is a tool from the future existing in this small village 2,000 years ahead of schedule. The night deepens, and the master smith continues his percussive sermon at the anvil, forging a blade that is a masterpiece of both art and science. It's easy to get lost in the romance of the sword. It is, after all, a symbol of power, of sovereignty, of the ultimate defense against the dangers of a hostile world. An army equipped with blades like this would be nearly invincible against one armed with the soft, bending iron of their contemporaries. You could conquer a kingdom with this technology. But if you think this story is just about making a better weapon, you're missing the real revolution. The true power of this carbon steel wasn't just in its ability to take a life, but in its profound ability to sustain it. The sword may be the king, but the axe, the hoe, and the adze are the kingdom. Let the scene at the forge fade for a moment, and let the sun rise on a new day. A man stands at the edge of the village clearing where the cultivated land meets the wild, untamed forest. He needs to clear more ground to plant another grove of bananas for his growing family. A generation ago, this would have been a monumental back-breaking task. With a stone axe, you are not so much cutting a tree as you are bludgeoning it into submission over the course of several days. With a soft iron axe, you'd spend half your time resharpening the edge and the other half trying to straighten it after it bent on a tough knot. But this man holds a Haya axe, The handle is smooth, fire-hardened wood, perfectly balanced. The head is a wedge of this remarkable carbon steel. He swings. The sound is not the dull thud of iron, but a clean, resonant thwack that rings through the morning air. The axe bites deep into the trunk of the tree, sending a spray of large, fragrant wood chips flying. He pulls it free with a single, fluid motion. It doesn't stick. It doesn't bind. Swing after swing, he opens a massive V-shaped wound in the tree's side. The blade's edge remains terrifyingly sharp. It doesn't dull. It doesn't deform. In less than an hour, with a final groaning crack, the tree surrenders and crashes to the forest floor. What once took days now takes a fraction of the time. This is what a revolution looks like. It's not a banner waving on a battlefield. It's the sound of an axe turning a forest into a farm. More land cleared means more food grown. More food means a healthier, larger, and more secure population. Now, walk over to the fields where the women are working under the morning sun. They are tilling the rich red earth with hoes. And again, the tool is the hero of the story. The Haya hoe blade, forged from carbon steel, is thin, light, and incredibly tough. When it strikes one of the countless rocks hidden in the soil, it doesn't bend or chip. It either bounces off with a sharp clink or, if the rock is soft enough, shatters it. This allows for deeper, more effective cultivation, breaking up compacted soil and allowing roots to grow strong. It makes the constant, laborious work of weeding faster and more efficient. Less energy is expended for a greater return. This simple tool is the engine of their agricultural surplus. The revolution extends into every corner of their lives. Look at the houses. The sturdy wooden frames that support the wattle and daub walls were shaped with steel adzes and chisels that could carve precise joints, making the structures stronger and more durable. Think of the woodcarver, sitting in the shade, creating a ceremonial drum or an intricate stool. With a set of fine steel blades, he can achieve a level of detail and artistry that would be impossible with softer tools. It's the difference between trying to draw with a lump of charcoal versus a finely sharpened pencil. It's the tool that unlocks the craftsman's full potential, making your attempts at assembling flat-pack furniture look even more pathetic by comparison. Historians still argue whether the advent of this superior steel directly triggered a massive population explosion, or if it simply provided a more stable and prosperous foundation for the existing population to thrive. Was it the cause of their success, or a result of having the stability to innovate in the first place? It's a classic chicken and egg debate, but what is certain is that this technology fundamentally changed their relationship with their environment. They could shape it, manage it, and harvest its resources with an efficiency previously unimaginable. A fascinating quirk of their culture, like many in the region, was the concept of bride price, where a groom's family provides a gift to the bride's family. While often paid in cattle, a set of expertly crafted carbon steel tools, a fine axe, a set of hoe blades, would have represented immense wealth and prestige. A man who could provide such tools was proving his ability to build a strong and prosperous household. He was a good investment. The tools were not just objects, they were the currency of survival and success. From the steel fishing hook that doesn't T-straighten and lose the prize catch to the sharp knife that makes butchering an animal a swift and clean process, this metal was woven into the very fabric of their daily existence. The sword was for the day of crisis, but the tools were for every other day in between. The blade is finished, the axe head is forged, the hoe is ready for the earth. But the story of this steel doesn't end in the village. This is where it begins. The Haya are not living in a bubble. They are a single, extraordinarily bright node in a vast interconnected web of human interaction that spans the continent. And when you have a product that is centuries ahead of everyone else's, the world beats a path to your door. The clearing, once just the home of a self-sufficient community, now becomes something else, an economic powerhouse, the epicenter of a thriving trade network. It's the Silicon Valley of the African Iron Age, and they have a patent that no one can crack. You see it happen. A group of men arrives, their journey having taken them weeks. They are not Haya. Their dialect is different. Their clothing woven from fibers you don't recognize. Their bodies adorned with beads of a type not made here. They are traders, middlemen in a long and arduous supply chain. They have not come for food or bark cloth. They have come for the metal. They lead porters who carry not goods to sell, but goods to buy with. Great, rough-woven bags heavy with salt harvested from the distant salt pans of Lake Katwe. They carry elephant tusks, their creamy white ivory a substance of immense value and prestige. They have bundles of copper ingots, mined hundreds of miles to the south, a metal prized for its beauty and used for jewelry and ornamentation. The negotiation is a slow, formal affair, overseen by a village elder or chief. The master smith is present, a figure of silent authority. He doesn't haggle, he simply displays his wares. The traders are shown not just finished tools, but the real prize, the raw billets of consolidated high-carbon steel. These rough, rectangular blocks of metal are the Haya's gold bars. A finished sword is a weapon for one man, but a billet is potential itself. A distant blacksmith who knows how to forge but not how to smelt this supermetal can buy a Haya billet and create dozens of his own superior tools, becoming a man of immense importance in his own community. The Haya are not just selling a product, they are exporting a revolution. You can imagine the scene. A trader holds up a gleaming elephant tusk. The Haya elder considers it, then points to a stack of 5 steel axe heads. The trader protests, gesturing for more. The elder simply shakes his head. The negotiation continues, a quiet dance of supply and demand where the Haya hold all the best cards. They have a complete monopoly. There is no alternative, no cheaper knockoff brand from a neighboring village. If you want the best, you come here and you pay the price. A quirky but common medium of exchange across much of Africa was the cowrie shell, brought all the way from the Indian Ocean. A single steel spearhead might be worth hundreds, even thousands of these small, porcelain-like shells, each one representing a tiny piece of a vast, continent-spanning economy. It's a bit like buying a new car with a truckload of loose change, but the system worked. Once the deals are struck, the goods change hands. The Haya community is enriched with salt, a vital nutrient in a hot climate, with copper to adorn their leaders and their wives, with ivory to carve into symbols of power, and the traders begin their long journey home, their porters now bent under the much heavier, denser weight of steel. Their journey is perilous. There are no highways, no security guards, just narrow footpaths through dense forests and grasslands teeming with predators, both animal and human. Every mile they travel away from this village, the value of their cargo multiplies. Archaeologists continue to debate the full extent of these trade routes and whether Haya steel in billet, or finished form, made it as far as the Swahili coast to be traded with Arab dhows or south toward the great kingdoms of the Zambezi. The evidence is buried, but the logic is undeniable. A product this good does not stay local for long. The impact on the Haya is profound. They are no longer just successful farmers. They are industrialists. Wealth flows into the village, changing its social structure. The chiefs who control the trade and the master smiths who control the production become figures of immense power and influence. Their homes become larger, their families are adorned with more copper and ivory, their granaries are fuller. This technological supremacy translates directly into political and economic dominance. They are the regional superpower, their strength forged not in conquest but in a furnace. They have turned a secret of the swamp into the foundation of a kingdom. The wealth of ivory and salt now stored in the village is tangible proof of their success. But as you watch the life of the community, you begin to understand that their incredible technological achievement is not, in their minds, a simple matter of chemistry and physics. You've witnessed the engineering, but you have yet to see the soul of the machine. To the Haya, the process of smelting is not an industrial act. It is a sacred and terrifyingly delicate ritual of procreation. They are not manufacturing steel. They are giving birth to it. The master smith, the man who commands this fiery process, is far more than a technician. He is a priest, a shaman, an intermediary between the world of the living and the potent elemental spirits of the earth and fire. His knowledge is not seen as the result of trial and error, but as a divine gift, a secret whispered to a long-dead ancestor by a god or a powerful nature spirit. This makes him the guardian of a sacred trust, and the rituals he performs are not superstition. They are the essential operating instructions that came with that divine gift. Trying to smelt steel without the proper chants and offerings would be, to him, like trying to fly a plane by flapping your arms. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the forces you are dealing with. It comes with a spiritual terms and conditions agreement that you really need to read before clicking I agree. You now see the furnace, the mushonga, through their eyes. It is not an it is a she. The furnace is explicitly female, a great earthen womb. The act of building it from the clay of termite mounds, themselves symbols of fertility and community, is an act of consecration. When they load her with ore and charcoal, they are implanting a seed. The bellows, operated by the powerful rhythmic thrusts of the men, are a profoundly masculine act, breathing life and energy into the womb. The entire smelt is a reenactment of conception and gestation on a cosmic scale. The master smith is the midwife, carefully tending to the process using his secret knowledge to ensure a successful birth. This deep, gendered symbolism is the key to understanding the strict taboos that surround the entire operation. You see now why no women are allowed near the furnace while it is in labor. Their presence, particularly that of a menstruating woman, is seen as a source of immense spiritual power that could interfere with the delicate, symbolic procreation happening inside the furnace. It would introduce a competing creative force that could confuse the spirits, resulting in a weak or stillborn bloom of iron. It's not a statement of inferiority. It's one of profound respect for the power of female fertility, a power so great it has to be kept separate lest it overwhelm the process. Likewise, the smith and his team must undergo a period of ritual purification before a smelt. This almost always includes sexual abstinence. They must focus all their creative masculine energy on the furnace womb. They have to be spiritually single-minded, like a high-strung artist who locks themselves in their studio before a big show, refusing all distractions. Anthropologists and historians still argue whether these complex belief systems were developed to explain a mystifying scientific process, or if the beliefs themselves were the framework that allowed for the innovation in the first place. Did they stumble upon the right technique and then build a myth to protect the secret? Or did a pre-existing myth about a sacred swamp grass lead them to try adding it to the furnace? It's a fascinating question about the relationship between faith and science. You witness the smaller rituals now with new understanding. Before the firing, the master smith pours a libation of the sweet, potent banana beer into one of the tuyères, an offering to quench the furnace mother's thirst. He might add a handful of sacred grain, a gift to ensure a bountiful birth. Chants are sung, quiet, ancient songs that are part prayer, part technical instruction, their melodies passed down through 100 generations. When the bloom is finally pulled from the fiery heart of the furnace, it is seen as a newborn child, ugly, powerful, and full of potential. Its first cry is the clang of the hammer, and the steel it becomes is not just a material. It has a spirit, a life force imparted to it during its violent sacred birth. This is why a good sword or a strong axe is treated with such respect. It is not just a tool, it is a living thing. The spiritual and technological world of the Haya feels complete, a self-contained universe of fire, faith, and family. It is tempting to look at this incredible achievement, this leap into the future of steel, and see it as a lightning strike of isolated genius, a miracle that occurred in a vacuum. You can picture a single brilliant ancestor having a eureka moment while staring into a fire, the entire complex process downloading into his brain like a software update. But history is rarely that neat. People talk, ideas travel. The question that hangs in the humid air, as potent as the smell of charcoal, is this: were the Haya truly alone in their genius? Or were they part of a much larger continent-wide conversation about the nature of fire and stone? To find the answer, you have to let your perspective drift upwards, leaving the small clearing by Lake Victoria and ascending until the Great Lake itself is just a glittering puddle below. You travel north, following the invisible thread of the White Nile as it meanders through vast wetlands and savannas. You are heading toward an older, grander, and more famous civilization. In the land known as Nubia, in modern-day Sudan, lies the ancient kingdom of Kush. And on the banks of the Nile sits its magnificent capital, Meroe. As you approach, you see a city that rivals the glories of Egypt, its former conqueror and later its rival. There are dozens of steep-sided, sharp-angled pyramids piercing the sky, the tombs of Kushite kings and queens, There are grand temples dedicated to gods like Amun and the local lion-headed deity, Apadimak. But what truly defines Meroe, what made it a legend in the ancient world, is not its temples or tombs. It's the smoke. A constant hazy plume of it rises from the outskirts of the city, and beneath it, you see the unmistakable, hellish glow of countless furnaces. This was one of the greatest iron-producing centers of the ancient world. The slag heaps, the glassy, black waste product from smelting, left behind by Meroitic smiths, were so colossal that 19th-century travelers mistook them for a range of volcanic hills. It was dubbed the Birmingham of Africa, a title that, while a bit anachronistic, captures the sheer industrial scale of the operation. Here, then, is a source. A powerful, sophisticated, iron-obsessed culture that existed for centuries before the Haya hit their stride. Archaeologists and historians fiercely debate whether the Haya's blast furnace technology was an independent invention, or if its core principles diffused south from the great iron centers of the Nile Valley, like Meroe. The Nile, after all, was the great information superhighway of antiquity. It's plausible that the basic idea of a taller, more efficient shaft furnace traveled south along the trade routes, passed from trader to trader, from village to village, until it reached the Great Lakes. A Kushite smith, perhaps, seeking new resources or escaping a conflict, could have brought the seeds of the knowledge with him. But when you look closer, the theory starts to fray. The distance is immense, over 1,000 miles of punishing travel, including passage through the Sud, one of the world's largest and most impenetrable swamps. More importantly, the technologies are different. Meroitic furnaces were advanced, yes, but there is no definitive evidence they used the Haya's key innovations: the systematic preheating of air through extended tuyères or the deliberate use of carbon-rich swamp grass as a chemical reagent. It's like comparing a top-of-the-line Roman chariot to an early steam engine. They both use wheels, but the driving principle is fundamentally different. It seems more likely that this is a case of convergent evolution, where two separate cultures, faced with similar resources and needs, arrived at similar yet distinct solutions. The traditional story of iron in Africa was always a simple, linear one. The technology was supposedly invented by the Hittites in Anatolia around 1500 BCE. From there, it was passed to the Egyptians, who were surprisingly late adopters, then taught to the Nubians at Meroe, and from Meroe it slowly trickled down to the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. The Haya's carbon steel completely demolishes this tidy, condescending timeline. They weren't waiting for instructions from the great civilizations to the north. They were innovating in parallel, and in this specific case, they had surpassed them. A fascinating and often overlooked piece of the puzzle lies far to the west, in what is now Nigeria. Here the Nok culture was producing life-sized terracotta sculptures and smelting iron as early as 1000 BCE, long before Meroe became a major industrial power. This suggests that iron technology wasn't a single gift passed down one sacred river. It was a fire that sparked to life in multiple places across the continent independently. So as you return to the Haya clearing, the echoes from Meroe seem faint and distant. Whether the first Haya smith ever heard a whisper of the furnaces of Kush is a mystery we may never solve. But it doesn't diminish his achievement. He and his descendants didn't just copy a design, they perfected one. The synthesis of the termite mound clay, the carbon-rich swamp grass, and the ingenious preheating tuyères, that recipe, that stroke of genius belongs to this place and this people alone. They weren't just singing a song they'd overheard. They were composing their own symphony of fire and steel. You stand in the firelight of the Haya village, a witness to their singular genius. The sparks from the master smith's hammer seem to write a secret history in the dark air. Now hold that image, that sound, that smell. Let's put this achievement on the scale of world history, because impressive doesn't even begin to cover it. To do that, you have to leave this warm, vibrant clearing and travel not just across space but forward through time to see how the rest of the world, specifically Europe, played a very, very long game of catch-up. Let's start with the year zero. While the Haya are pulling blooms of high-carbon steel from their termite clay wombs, what is the most advanced European smith doing? You find him in a smoky, timber-framed hut in the middle of a dark, damp German forest. He is a master of his craft, revered by his tribe. but his furnace is a small clay-lined pit in the ground. He can't reach the temperatures the Haya can. He can't melt iron. He can only coax it into a spongy, slag-riddled bloom of soft wrought iron. His finest creation, a sword for his chieftain, is a beautiful object, but it will bend in the heat of battle. His technology is, to be blunt, a full 2 millennia behind what you have just witnessed. For the next 1,000 years, European smiths work diligently within these limitations. They become incredibly skilled, not at making better steel from scratch, but at working with the flawed materials they have. They invent ingenious but labor-intensive workarounds. One of the most beautiful of these is pattern welding. Unable to produce a single uniform billet of high-quality steel, they would take what they had, rods of soft, ductile iron and rods of slightly harder, but more brittle iron that had absorbed some carbon, and twist them together while red hot, like forging a metallic candy cane. They would then hammer this twisted bundle flat, weld it to a cutting edge of the best steel they could find, and repeat the process. The result was a blade with a stunning watery pattern on its surface, and it was stronger than a simple iron sword because it distributed the stresses between the soft and hard components. It was an act of profound craftsmanship, a testament to their skill. But it was also a desperate and complicated solution to a problem the Haya had already solved in a single elegant step. Even the most legendary weapons of this era were shrouded in mystery. Take the famed Ulfbert swords of the Viking Age, from around the 9th to 11th centuries. These blades were of such shockingly high quality, made from a form of crucible steel with almost no slag, that for years they baffled archaeologists. Historians still argue whether the Frankish or Norse smiths who made them had somehow independently discovered an incredibly difficult method for producing this ultra-clean steel, or if they were importing the raw steel ingots from the Middle East and Central Asia via the vast Viking trade routes along the Volga River. The fact that the origin of a handful of high-quality swords from 1,000 years after the Haya is still a major academic fistfight tells you everything you need to know about how rare this technology was in Europe. The first true blast furnaces, structures capable of fully melting iron, don't begin to appear in Europe until the late Middle Ages, perhaps in Sweden or Germany around the 12th or 13th century. That's more than 1,000 years after the Haya were operating theirs. And even then, these early European blast furnaces were used to produce cast iron, also known as pig iron. This stuff has too much carbon, making it as brittle as glass. You could cast it into a cannon or a fire grate, but you couldn't forge it into a sword or an axe because it would shatter on the first blow. To make steel, they had to take this brittle pig iron and put it through a second, difficult and expensive process in a finery forge to remove most of the carbon, and then a third process to add just the right amount back in. It was a clumsy, multi-stage, energy-guzzling affair. The Haya were doing it all in one step in one furnace. So when did Europe finally catch up? When did they finally figure out how to make high-quality steel efficiently and in large quantities, the way the Haya had been doing for their own community? The answer is not in the Renaissance, not in the Age of Enlightenment. The answer is 1856. That's the year the Englishman Henry Bessemer patented his Bessemer converter, a pear-shaped furnace that could convert molten pig iron into steel in a matter of minutes by blowing air through it. This invention kicked off the Second Industrial Revolution. It made steel cheap and abundant for the first time in history, allowing for the construction of skyscrapers, railroad tracks, great bridges, and battleships. The Bessemer process literally built the modern world. Now do the math. The Haya were producing high-carbon steel in a sophisticated blast furnace roughly 2,000 years ago. Henry Bessemer, lauded as the father of the modern steel industry, filed his patent in 1856. The Haya had a nearly 2 millennia head start. They had figured out the elegant, direct-to-steel method that European metallurgists, with all their written knowledge and proto-scientific inquiry, wouldn't master until the age of the steam engine and the telegraph. The Haya didn't have patent lawyers, of course, which is probably for the best. Can you imagine the paperwork? It's a staggering, humbling realization. The engine that would build the modern world was first test-driven not in Sheffield or Pittsburgh, but in a quiet village in the heart of Africa. The Haya's achievement is monumental, a 2,000-year lead in the race to the modern world. Their knowledge has made them rich, powerful, and secure. The forges burn brighter and more frequently now, fulfilling orders that come from farther and farther away. The sound of the hammer is the sound of prosperity. But every great fire casts a great shadow, and as you watch this civilization at its zenith, you begin to notice the hidden cost, the unseen invoice for all this success. It's written not in the account books of the chief, but in the landscape itself. The engine of this entire revolution runs on a single ravenous fuel, charcoal, and the supply is not infinite. To understand the scale of the problem, you have to follow the woodcutters. Every few days, a team of men leaves the village, not with hoes to farm or spears to hunt, but with heavy carbon steel axes slung over their shoulders. A generation ago, the great ancient forest began at the edge of the clearing. Now, the men have to walk for nearly an hour to reach the dense stands of old-growth hardwoods they require. They are chasing a retreating resource. The land they walk through isn't barren, but it is changed. It's scrubland, dotted with the stumps of long-felled giants, now covered in secondary growth of bushes and smaller, less useful trees. When they reach the deep forest, they select their targets, large, dense hardwoods like acacia. The ring of their superior axes makes quick work of the trees, but the labor is still immense. They spend the day felling, then chopping the massive trunks and limbs into manageable lengths. But they don't haul this wood back to the village. That would be wildly inefficient. Instead, they become charcoal burners, practitioners of an ancient, smoky, and deeply secretive art. They stack the wood in a massive, carefully arranged mound, creating a complex internal structure of logs and air passages. Then they cover the entire thing with earth and turf, leaving only a few small vents. They light a fire in its heart and then seal it up, starving it of oxygen. For the next several days, the mound smolders. It doesn't burn with an open flame, it pyrolyzes. The wood is baked in its own heat, driving off water, methane, tar, and every other volatile compound, until all that remains is almost pure, lightweight carbon. The men must watch it constantly, tending the vents, reading the color and smell of the smoke to ensure it doesn't burst into flame and destroy their entire effort. They are effectively slow cooking a forest. These charcoal burners in many societies were a breed apart, men who lived on the fringes, smelled perpetually of smoke, and guarded the secrets of their craft as jealously as the smiths guarded theirs. After the slow burn is complete and the mound has cooled, a process that can take a week or more, they break it open. Inside is the prize, a pile of brittle black charcoal. But the pile is shockingly smaller than the mountain of wood that created it. The process is incredibly inefficient. It takes about 5 tons of wood to produce 1 ton of charcoal. Then, you factor in the furnace's own voracious appetite. It takes roughly 15 kilograms of that precious charcoal to produce a single kilogram of steel. The math is brutal. For every single steel axe head that a trader carries away, a small but significant patch of forest has been felled, cooked, and consumed. This village isn't just exporting steel. It is, in a very real sense, exporting its ecosystem. This was not a uniquely Haya problem. It was the great paradox of the Iron Age. The very technology that allowed civilizations to clear forest for agriculture was powered by the destruction of those same forests. Roman Britain was heavily deforested to fuel its iron industry. This was the original energy crisis. Ecological historians debate how quickly this deforestation occurred around Lake Victoria and whether the Haya were consciously aware of the long-term consequences of their industry. Did they see the receding forests as a sign of impending doom, or simply as an inconvenience, a logistical challenge that required them to walk a bit farther each year? There were no environmental impact studies, no forestry commissions. There was only the immediate, pressing demand for more fuel to feed the sacred, hungry furnace. And so, tree by tree, the landscape that had sustained them for centuries was being slowly, inexorably consumed in the fires of their own success. The fire has a long and hungry memory. The price for 2 millennia of technological dominance is now coming due, and it is being paid in trees. The walk to find suitable hardwood is no longer a short stroll. It is a full day's trek. The woodcutters return not with the triumphant bounty of old, but with a meager, compromised harvest. The great, dense hardwoods are gone from this region, replaced by a faster-growing, less suitable scrub. The charcoal they produce from this inferior wood is lighter, less potent. It doesn't burn with the same sustained, incandescent fury. It's like trying to power a supercar with lawnmower fuel. The engine still runs, but the roar is gone. This has a direct, devastating impact on the smelt. The master smith, now an old man, his face a roadmap of deep lines, can feel the difference. He can hear it in the furnace's voice, a lower, less confident rumble. He can see it in the color of the flame at the tuyères, a paler orange where it should be a brilliant, blinding white. The preheated air system, so ingenious and effective, is being starved of the high-quality fuel it needs to work its magic. He can no longer consistently reach the scorching temperatures of 1800 C. The melts become less reliable. Sometimes the bloom is good, sometimes it is sluggish and contaminated with slag, more like the common iron of other peoples. The sacred recipe, unchanged for generations, is failing because a key ingredient, the very energy of the forest, is running out. But an even greater change is coming, one carried on the winds from the east and the ships from the great, unknown oceans. New people have arrived on the distant coasts, first the Arabs, and later the Europeans. They bring new goods, new ideas, and a new kind of economy. They bring mountains of cheap iron goods forged not with sacred ritual in a single, magnificent furnace, but mass-produced in the burgeoning industries of India, the Middle East, and eventually Europe. A Portuguese trading captain sailing up the coast doesn't care about the spiritual resilience of a hoe. He has a cargo hold full of thousands of iron hoe heads, maybe not as good, but available for a handful of beads or a bolt of cloth. It's the ancient world's first taste of globalization, and it's a killer for the local artisan. Historians still argue whether the decline of the Haya steel industry was primarily driven by this ecological collapse from deforestation, or by the economic disruption caused by the arrival of these cheaper, mass-produced foreign metals. It was likely a devastating 1-2 punch. The local supply chain was breaking down from the inside, just as a flood of cheap imports began to swamp the market from the outside. The long, perilous trade routes that once brought traders seeking Haya steel now begin to reverse, bringing foreign iron inland. Why would a chief 100 miles away send his men on a dangerous 3-month journey for a dozen Haya billets, when a new trade route can bring him 100 mediocre spearheads for half the price? The complex social and spiritual infrastructure that supported the smelting process begins to crumble. The master smith's role, once central to the village's power and identity, becomes marginalized. He is no longer the linchpin of the regional economy. He is an old man practicing an art that is becoming obsolete, a master craftsman in a world that is starting to value quantity over quality. His apprentices, the young men who were to carry the sacred knowledge into the next generation, see the changing world. They realize there is more wealth and a much easier life to be had in guiding the new trade caravans or cultivating new crops than in spending 16 hours pumping a bellows in front of a terrifyingly hot furnace for a product fewer and fewer people want to buy. It's the ancient equivalent of leaving the family's master watchmaking business to sell cheap digital clocks. The sacred knowledge itself begins to fray. This intricate body of information, the exact ratio of ore to charcoal, the specific types of swamp grass, the songs that dictate the rhythm of the bellows, the spiritual meaning of every action, was never written down. It existed only in the collective memory of the smiths, passed down through action and spoken word. Such oral traditions are incredibly robust, but only when they are practiced. Once the furnace falls silent for a season, then a year, then a decade, the details begin to fade. The chants become just old songs, their deeper technical meaning lost. The rituals become just motions, their purpose forgotten. It's a known phenomenon. The Incan Empire used a complex system of knotted strings called quipu to keep records. When the Spanish suppressed their use, the ability to read these intricate three-dimensional records was lost in a single generation. The Haya's knowledge was their quipu, and it was dissolving into myth. The flame is not extinguished in a sudden gust of wind. It is simply not fed, and so it slowly, quietly starves. The furnace does not just grow cold. It is dismantled by the slow, inexorable forces of time and neglect. Generations are born and die, and the great roar of the smelt fades from living experience into memory, and then from memory into myth. The clearing, once a place of fire and industry, returns to a quieter rhythm. The incessant percussive clang of the hammer is replaced by the gentle thump of grain being pounded, and the laughter of children who have never known the furnace's heat or the terror of its power. The story of the steelmakers becomes a tale told by grandparents to wide-eyed children, a legend of a time when their ancestors commanded a magic that could turn rock into invincible blades. It sounds as fantastical to them as a story of men who could fly. Your journey takes another leap forward in time. The year is now somewhere in the mid-20th century. The world outside this small village has been torn apart and remade by 2 world wars. The atom has been split, and men are dreaming of walking on the moon. But here, life moves to a slower, more ancient cadence. You are sitting in the shade of a mango tree, the oppressive afternoon heat softened by a slight breeze that carries the scent of dust and dry grass. You are with a group of old men, the elders of this community. Their faces are like maps of time, etched with deep lines of laughter and sorrow. Their hands resting on their knees are gnarled and powerful, but they are the hands of farmers and fishermen, not smiths. They are the last link. They are the final generation to have spoken with the men whose fathers actually worked the great forges. They are telling you stories. One of them, a man with a cataract-clouded eye and a slow, deliberate way of speaking, points with his chin towards a circular cattle pen in the middle of the village. "There," he says, his voice a dry rasp. "That is where the Mushonga stood." My grandfather told me. He said when it was breathing, the ground would tremble and the sound would chase the lions from the hills. The other men nod in silent agreement. There is no marker, no monument. The sacred technological heart of their people, a wonder of the ancient world, has been replaced by a simple enclosure for livestock. It's as if someone had built a petting zoo on the ruins of a cathedral. You listen as they piece together the fragmented memories of their grandfathers. They speak of the termite mound clay and how it had to be harvested from a specific place, a place whose location is now forgotten. They talk of the swamp grass, nodding toward the distant wetlands. "Not just any grass," another elder interjects, his voice stronger. "It had to be the kind that grew in the deep water, the kind with the purple flower." He knows this detail, but he doesn't know why. The chemical necessity has been lost, leaving only a folk memory, a piece of a recipe without the instructions. They remember the bellows. They describe the 8 men, the rhythm of their work, the immense strength it required. One of the old men closes his eyes and begins to hum, a low rhythmic chant. He taps his hand on his knee. Thump, thump, whoosh, thump, thump, whoosh. It's a bellows song. The work chant that synchronized the men's movements for hours on end. It's a ghost of a sound, a melody without its machine. He sings a few words, then stops, shaking his head. "The rest is gone," he says. "My grandfather knew all the words. He said the words told the smith when the metal was ready to be born. The technical manual encoded in a song is now just a catchy, forgotten tune." Anthropologists debate how accurately these oral traditions preserved the precise technical details versus the spiritual and narrative elements of the smelt. Listening to these men, you get a sense of the answer. The grand dramatic elements are perfectly preserved. The roar, the river of fire, the terrible heat, the sacredness of the act. But the fine-grained scientific data, the exact temperatures, the precise layering technique, the chemical purpose of the swamp grass, has eroded over time like the inscriptions on a weathered stone. The what and the who have survived, but much of the how and the why has vanished into the mists of history. They are the keepers of a story they no longer fully understand. They possess the index to a library of knowledge, but all the books have been burned. There is a profound sadness in the air, but also a deep pride. They know their ancestors were great. They know they possessed a power that is now lost to them. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the clearing, you look at these old men, the last masters of the forge who have never touched a hammer to a bloom. They are a treasure of incalculable value, and they do not even know it. The world believes their stories are impossible, the fanciful boast of a people romanticizing their past. But the truth is buried, not just in their memories, but a few feet beneath the cow dung in the cattle pen right in front of you. The old men's stories hang in the twilight air, as insubstantial as the smoke from a cooking fire. The past they speak of feels utterly disconnected from the present. And as you look around the village, you realize that the physical evidence of their ancestors' greatness has been almost completely erased, swallowed by the patient, relentless process of nature and the casual indifference of everyday life. The great slag heaps, once towering glassy black monuments to thousands of successful smelts, are no longer visible. They have been weathered down by centuries of rain, their sharp edges softened, their surfaces covered by a thick blanket of soil and tangled vegetation. They now look like simple, rolling hillocks, indistinguishable from the natural contours of the land. Children play on them, goats graze on them, entirely unaware that they are standing on the industrial waste of a forgotten revolution. The furnace itself, the sacred mushanga that once dominated the clearing, is gone without a trace. Its termite clay walls, once fired to the hardness of ceramic, have crumbled under the assault of sun and storm. The valuable iron components, the pokers and tongs, were likely repurposed long ago. The very foundation of the structure, as the elder pointed out, is now buried beneath the compacted, dung-rich earth of a cattle pen. The history isn't just forgotten, it is actively being trampled into the dirt, sealed away under the rhythms of a new, simpler agricultural life. The evidence is not lost, but it is deeply hidden, speaking a language no one currently alive knows how to read. This quiet internal forgetting was compounded by a much louder, more aggressive form of historical erasure imposed from the outside. As the 19th and 20th centuries dawned, this part of Africa fell under the control of European colonial powers, first German, then British. With the colonizers came a worldview that had no room for the story of the highest smiths. To the Victorian mind, Africa was the dark continent, a place of primitive tribes, a land without history, invention, or progress. It was a blank slate upon which European civilization would graciously write its own story. The prevailing academic theory of the time, the so-called Hamitic hypothesis, explicitly stated that any sign of complex civilization or advanced technology found in sub-Saharan Africa must have been introduced by a lighter-skinned, Hamitic race from the north, a lost tribe of Egyptians or Phoenicians perhaps. The idea that indigenous black Africans could have developed a sophisticated technology entirely on their own was not just unlikely, it was considered impossible, a violation of the established racial and civilizational hierarchies of the day. This mindset led to some truly bizarre and frankly racist historical gymnastics. A perfect example is the case of Great Zimbabwe, the magnificent stone ruins of a medieval city in southern Africa. When German explorer Karl Mauch came across it in 1871, he was so certain that local Africans could not have built it that he declared it must have been a replica of the Queen of Sheba's palace built by Phoenicians. For decades, the entire weight of colonial archaeology was dedicated to proving this foreign origin, searching for any scrap of evidence to deny the achievement of the local Shona people. The extent to which this colonial-era ethnography accurately recorded indigenous technological practices versus projecting its own biases onto the subject is a continuous source of scholarly debate. Early researchers often didn't know the right questions to ask, and when they were given an answer that contradicted their worldview, they simply dismissed it as folklore. An old man's story about his ancestors making a metal harder than European iron would have been recorded in a notebook, not as a piece of scientific data, but as a charming example of native superstition. So the Haya's history was buried twice. First, under the soil of their own village, and second, under the crushing weight of a colonial narrative that had already decided who they were and what they were capable of. The British built railways through East Africa, the steel for the tracks and the engines forged in the great industrial furnaces of Sheffield and Birmingham. The very symbol of modern progress, the iron horse, was laying down a new reality on top of the old one, its imported steel making the memory of the local, superior version seem like a foolish dream. The world had moved on, and it had rewritten the rule book. The new rule said that innovation came from Europe. The past was a foreign country, and in this case, Europe had issued its own passports and denied all other visas. The truth lay sleeping, waiting for someone to come along who was willing to do two simple but revolutionary things. Look at the ground and listen to the old men. The silence of the forgotten forge stretches for decades, a long, quiet sleep. But now the world is changing again. It is the 1970s. Tanzania is a proud, independent nation, and a new generation of scholars is emerging, one that is beginning to question the dusty colonial-era narratives that have sat on the shelves for a century. Your name is Peter Schmidt. You are a young American archaeologist and anthropologist, and you are not here to impose a theory upon the landscape. You are here to listen. You've come to the western shores of Lake Victoria to study the history of the Haya people, to map their ancient settlements and understand their past, not as a footnote to European history but on its own terms. You spend your days doing the slow, patient work of archaeology, walking transects, mapping pottery sherds, and carefully excavating test pits. But you spend your evenings doing the most important work of all. You sit with the elders. You share their food, you learn their language, and you earn their trust. And in the quiet hours, as the cooking fires burn down to embers, they begin to tell you the old stories. They tell you about their ancestors, the Bahinda, who were not just farmers, but masters of a lost art. They tell you of a furnace that stood in the center of the village, a furnace that roared like a lion and gave birth to a metal that was stronger and sharper than any other. They tell you about a special swamp grass with a purple flower that had to be added to the fire, a secret offering that made the metal sing. They speak of a river of fire that would flow from the furnace, and of a heat so intense it could melt the very stones. You listen and you write it all down in your field notebooks. And a part of you, the part trained in the sober empirical science of Western academia, is deeply skeptical. Your professors back at the university would read these notes and smile indulgently. A fascinating creation myth, they would say. A classic example of how a pre-scientific people use metaphor to describe a common bloomery iron smelt. The details of the story are, according to the established laws of metallurgy, impossible. Reaching temperatures hot enough to create molten slag and produce carbon steel directly from ore, that was a feat of the Industrial Revolution, achieved with massive coke-fired furnaces and advanced chemistry. Doing it in a mud and clay furnace powered by hand bellows in the African interior 2,000 years ago. It was ludicrous. It was a fairy tale. Archaeologists and academic historians of the period were still largely working from the assumption that all major technological innovations had diffused from the Near East or Europe, making an indigenous African leap of this magnitude unthinkable. But you are here, and your professors are not. And as you listen, you start to notice something. The elders' stories, while filled with spiritual meaning and metaphor, are also incredibly precise. They don't just say the furnace was hot. They describe a specific process. They don't just mention a magic ingredient. They name a specific plant from a specific habitat. They describe the 8 bellows, the preheating pipes, the ritual abstinence of the smiths. These are not the vague, dreamlike details of a myth. They are the specific, granular details of a technical manual passed down through oral tradition. It is like listening to someone describe the recipe for a complex dish they've never tasted, but whose instructions they have memorized perfectly. Then you start to connect the stories to the landscape. The old men point to a series of low, rolling hills at the edge of the village, covered in thick grass. The stories call this place the place of the Black Tears. You sink a small test pit into one of the hills and your shovel strikes something hard and glassy. It's not rock. It's a massive, dense layer of slag, the waste product of smelting. These aren't hills. They are ancient man-made industrial waste dumps of a staggering size. You find strange broken pieces of ceramic tubing in the fields, vitrified and blackened by intense heat. The elders tell you these are the lungs of the furnace. They are the tuyères the stories describe. A quirky tidbit you note is that local children would sometimes find these fragments and, due to their strange, almost metallic ringing sound when struck, use them as musical toys, a playful echo of a forgotten industrial roar. A radical, career-endangering idea begins to form in your mind. What if the stories aren't a metaphor? What if they are a memory? What if the impossible was once possible, right here on this spot? You realize you are at a crossroads. You can follow the dogma of your profession, dismiss the oral history as folklore, and write a perfectly respectable but wrong dissertation on Haya pottery styles. Or you can take the elders at their word. You can trust that they are the keepers of a true, if faded, history. You can make the outrageous hypothesis that their ancestors really did forge carbon steel 2,000 years before Bessemer, and that the proof is not just in the ground beneath your feet, but in the memories behind the old men's eyes. You have decided to bet your career on a fairy tale, and the first step is to convince the keepers of that tale to help you bring it back to life. You approach the elders, not with the detached authority of a scientist, but with the humility of a student. Through your translator, you explain your radical idea. You want to rebuild the Mushonga. You want them to teach you. You want to see if the old stories are true. At first, there is a deep, profound silence. They look at you, then at each other. You see a flicker of disbelief in their eyes, then amusement. A young man from a world of airplanes and cars wants to play with mud and fire, but then as the full weight of your request settles, something else dawns in their faces. A deep ancestral pride. You are not just asking about their history. You are asking them to reclaim it. The old man with the clouded eye, the one who first told you the stories, gives a slow, dignified nod. The others murmur their assent. The project is on. What follows is one of the most remarkable collaborations in the history of archaeology. This is the very definition of experimental archaeology, the practice of rebuilding the past, piece by piece, not just to see what it looked like, but to understand how it worked, to test the very limits of a forgotten technology. The elders, once your passive informants, are now the lead engineers, the site foremen, the holders of the sacred blueprints. Your university grant money pays for the labor, but their memory provides the genius. The first task is to find the right clay. You might assume any termite mound will do, but the elders are adamant. They lead you on a long walk, past a dozen towering mounds until they stop at a specific, half-eroded one, almost invisible under a tangle of vines. This one, the old man says, crumbling a piece of the reddish clay in his fingers. The clay from here is the strongest. It holds the fire's spirit without breaking. Your scientific mind suspects it has a higher kaolinite content, making it more refractory. But to them, it is a matter of spiritual integrity. The distinction doesn't matter. The result is the same. Under their direction, your team begins the back-breaking work of harvesting the sacred clay. Next, the swamp grass. You send a team member to the wetlands, and he returns with a huge bundle of reeds. An elder takes one look, scoffs, and throws it aside. He then personally wades deep into the murky water, his old legs surprisingly steady, and returns with a very specific type of sedge, pointing to its distinctive purple flower. This is not just swamp grass, this is the swamp grass. It's a moment of stunning vindication. The oral tradition wasn't a general guideline. It was a precise, repeatable scientific recipe. There is no user manual, and definitely no helpful online tutorial video. It's all in their heads. The construction begins. The elders direct the mixing of the clay and the chopped grass temper, testing the consistency with their hands. They guide the slow, coiled building of the walls, arguing passionately in their own language about the precise inward curve of the shaft. They show your team how to form the tuyères, the clay pipes, ensuring the central channel is smooth and clear. At one point, one of the elders insists that a small libation of banana beer must be poured on the foundation before the first layer is set. You dutifully record this in your notes as a ritual element, but you also make sure it happens. Archaeologists still debate how perfectly any modern reconstruction can replicate ancient conditions, from the exact mineral content of the ore to the barometric pressure on the day of the smelt, but here you are trying to replicate not just the chemistry, but the soul of the process. For weeks, the clearing is a hive of activity. It is a bridge across time. Young Haya men paid by your grant work alongside their grandfathers, learning a skill their own fathers had never known. You are the facilitator, the scribe, the student. You watch as a furnace that has not existed for centuries rises from the ground, summoned not from ancient ruins but from the ephemeral, powerful repository of human memory. It is a testament to the resilience of knowledge. Finally, it is finished. It stands in the sun, a perfect reddish-brown cone, its surface still soft. It is an exact living copy of the furnace from the stories. The old men walk around it, touching its walls, their faces filled with an emotion you cannot quite name. A mixture of pride, sorrow for what was lost, and a fierce, burning hope for what you are about to prove. The day of the firing arrives with a weight and a silence that feels different from any other day. The entire village gathers, forming a wide, respectful circle around the newly born furnace. There is no festive chatter, no children playing tag. There is only a profound, collective holding of breath. This is not a scientific experiment to them. It is a seance. They have come to see if the ghosts of their ancestors will answer their call. The elders, dressed in simple but dignified bark cloth, move with a slow, ritualistic gravity. They are no longer just old men telling stories. They are the high priests of a forgotten faith, and today, they are reopening their temple. Under their sole direction, the loading begins. You, Peter Schmidt, and your team are now merely assistants, handing them the materials they call for. They layer the furnace with a precision that borders on the religious. A bed of the finest charcoal, then the reddish iron ore, then a thick damp blanket of the purple-flowered swamp grass. The recipe from the oral tradition is followed without deviation. As the final layer is placed, one of the elders produces a small carved wooden bowl containing a mixture of ash and crushed herbs. He walks around the furnace, sprinkling a fine gray line on the ground, a sacred boundary to protect the womb from any malevolent spirits. This is a step that was not in their initial stories. It was a memory jogged by the very act of reconstruction, a detail that only surfaced when the context was made real again. It's a perfect, quirky example of how deeply intertwined the spiritual and the technical are. There will be no shortcuts. Then comes the fire. There are no matches, no lighters. An elder, his hands surprisingly steady, uses a traditional fire drill, a simple wooden spindle that he spins rapidly in a notch on a fireboard. After a few tense moments of furious friction, a tiny wisp of smoke appears, and a single precious ember is born. He carefully transfers this ember to a ball of dry tinder and blows on it gently, coaxing it into a small flame. This flame is then used to light a torch of bound grasses. He approaches the furnace and, with a chanted prayer, thrusts the torch deep into the base. The fire is lit. The gestation has begun. The 8 young Haya men take their positions at the bellows. The elders coach them, correcting their stance, demonstrating the long, smooth pull and the powerful, downward thrust. The head elder gives a sharp nod, and the breathing begins. Whoosh! For the first time in centuries, the clearing hears the rhythmic, life-giving breath of the mushonga. The sound is hesitant at first, a little ragged. But soon, the men find their rhythm, and the sound becomes a single, powerful, unified beat. A low hum starts in the furnace's core, and a thick, acrid smoke begins to pour from its chimney. The ghost is stirring. Hours pass under the equatorial sun. The hum becomes a roar. The heat becomes a physical presence, pushing the circle of onlookers farther and farther back. You watch the elders and you see them reading the furnace with an ancestral intimacy. They point to the color of the flame licking out from a crack near a tuyère. They listen to the pitch of the roar, nodding to each other. They are communing with the process, their faces masks of unbreakable concentration. Finally, the lead elder raises his hand. Silence. The bellows stop. He takes the heavy iron poker your team has forged for him and, just as the stories described, he shatters the clay plug of the tap hole. A brilliant, viscous river of yellow-white slag flows out, hissing and crackling into the prepared trench. The crowd lets out a collective gasp. It is the first sign. The temperature was reached. The separation was successful. Then comes the final, brutal moment of truth. With levers and tongs, your team helps the elders break open the furnace's front wall. Through a blinding wave of heat, you see it's not a pile of slaggy, half-smelted ore. It is a single, solid, coherent mass glowing a fierce cherry red. It is a bloom. They wrestle it free, and it thuds onto the earth, a perfect, ugly, miraculous newborn. The old man with the clouded eye, the one who hummed the bellows song, steps forward. He does not speak. He simply looks at the glowing bloom, and a single tear cuts a clean path through the dust on his ancient cheek. Subsequent analysis of this bloom and others from later reconstructions would confirm it. It was high-carbon steel, The results would spark debate among metallurgists regarding the exact consistency and control the ancient smiths could achieve in every smelt. But the fundamental fact was now undeniable. The old men's fairy tale was true. The roar of the furnace was a roar of vindication, an echo of genius that had finally, after 2,000 years, been heard again. The bloom lies on the scorched earth, no longer a furious incandescent red but a deep dark charcoal gray. Its immense heat now a gentle, shimmering haze in the cool night air. The experiment is over. The ancestors have answered. But as you stand here in the quiet aftermath, the roar of the furnace replaced by the gentle chirping of crickets, you realize that what has been forged here tonight is far more than a lump of high-carbon steel. It is a key that unlocks a new and more honest version of the human story. The unspoken legacy of that anonymous Congolese metallurgist who lived and died 2,000 years ago is not in the blades he made, but in the assumptions he shatters. We live in a world that loves to name its heroes. We build statues to Gutenberg for his printing press, to James Watt for his steam engine, to Henry Bessemer for his converter. Their genius is recorded, celebrated, and monetized. But who was the higher genius? Who was the man, or perhaps even the woman, who first looked at a termite mound and saw a crucible? Who first realized that a common swampweed held the secret to creating a metal of the future? We will never know their name. They left no patent, filed no paperwork, and probably didn't even get a decent bonus at the end of the year. Their monument is the quiet pride you see on the faces of their descendants, a legacy not of individual fame, but of collective, anonymous genius. It's a profound reminder that for every celebrated inventor, whose name we know, there are 1,000 nameless innovators whose discoveries were just as revolutionary, their stories lost to time, because they weren't written down in the right language or on the right continent. This single successful smelt forces us to redraw the map of human innovation, the comfortable linear narrative that has been taught for centuries, the one where civilization and technology begin in a fertile crescent and spread graciously outwards, with Europe eventually taking the lead, is shown to be a fiction. It wasn't a single torchlit relay race. It was 1,000 scattered bonfires, lit by different hands in different lands, all reaching for the same sky. The Haya were not waiting for the memo. They were writing their own, in a language of fire and earth that the rest of the world was not yet equipped to read. It proves that the capacity for scientific thought, for empirical observation, for experimentation and refinement is not the cultural property of any one people. It is the birthright of all of humanity. We mourn the burning of the Library of Alexandria as one of the greatest intellectual tragedies in history, the loss of countless irreplaceable scrolls of science, philosophy, and art. And it was. But the rediscovery of the Haya furnace reminds us of the thousands of unwritten libraries that have been lost, the vast repositories of knowledge, in metallurgy, in medicine, in agriculture, in navigation, that were stored not on papyrus but in oral traditions, in ritual, and in practice. When those practices ceased, the library, too, was lost. Scholars still debate how significantly findings like the Haya steel furnace have truly penetrated and altered the mainstream, Eurocentric curriculum of world history taught in schools. For now, it often remains a fascinating but niche piece of knowledge, a testament to the fact that it is sometimes easier to rebuild an ancient furnace than it is to dismantle an old prejudice. The legacy of the Haya smith is a challenge, a call to listen for the histories that are whispered, not shouted, and to look for the evidence that is buried, not displayed in a museum. It tells us that the past is not a settled, tidy place. It is an active, ongoing excavation, and sometimes the greatest treasures are found when you finally decide to trust the old man's story. The dark gray bloom now rests in the center of the clearing, a solid piece of a once impossible past made real. Its radiating heat has finally subsided, and the deep, profound quiet of the African night has returned to reclaim the space once held by the furnace's deafening roar. The old men, their work now complete and their ancestors' honor restored, have begun their slow, tired walk back to their homes, their forms melting into the shadows, leaving you alone with the stars and the cooling steel. The journey is over, and the world feels subtly, yet permanently, altered. A silenced voice has spoken again after 2 millennia, and it has reminded you that the story of human ingenuity is far richer, more complex, and more beautifully diverse than you had ever imagined. The fire is out now, but the light of that understanding continues to glow. A gentle ember in the landscape of your mind, a quiet warmth to carry with you as you prepare for your own well-earned rest. And as the last of the villagers' lights wink out, leaving only the brilliant, indifferent canopy of the cosmos, you can finally allow the stillness to envelop you, the lessons of the forge settling into a peaceful, quiet order as you drift toward sleep.